And what if I told you that every peso, every euro, every dollar you owe right now isn't really the problem? What would you think if I revealed that those piled up bills on your desk, those collector messages that keep you awake at night, those endless nights calculating numbers that never seem to add up, all of that is nothing more than the visible symptom of something much deeper happening inside you? Before we start, please like this video and tell me which part of the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating to see who joins us from different places, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let me ask you another question. How many times have you woken up in the middle of the night with that weight on your chest? That anxiety that tightens your throat when you think about everything you owe? Have you ever noticed that the harder you work, the more you strive, the more practical solutions you look for, and the more you cut expenses to the extreme, the mountain of debt seems to grow instead of shrink? If you're nodding your head right now, I want you to understand something fundamental. You are not alone, and most importantly, you're not fighting the real enemy. The reality I'm about to share with you may seem radical at first, even a little hard to accept. But stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover has the power to completely transform your relationship with money and abundance. You see, for years we've been conditioned to believe that debts are financial problems that require financial solutions. We're told we need to work more hours, get a second job, tighten our belts, negotiate with creditors. And yes, all those actions may seem logical, even necessary in the material world. But there's something no one has told you. As long as you keep looking at the problem from the same place, from that mindset of lack and limitation, you'll keep creating more of the same. What you're going to learn today isn't financial tricks or magical formulas to make money appear out of nowhere. What I'll share with you are 3 inner techniques that work on a much deeper level. The only place where true permanent change can happen, your consciousness, in the way you perceive yourself and your relationship with abundance. Because here's the secret that changes everything. You are not someone who has debt. You are someone being in debt. Do you see the difference? It's not what you have, it's what you are being. Think about it for a moment. Every time you say, "I'm in debt," every time you identify with that condition, you reinforce a state of consciousness that manifests in your external reality. It's as if you're standing under a light in such a way that you project a shadow shaped like debt. And here is where most people make the biggest mistake of their lives. They spend years, even decades, trying to change the shadow, fighting the projection, without realizing that all they need to do is move, change their internal position, transform the state of consciousness from which they are creating their experience. What you're about to discover now might surprise you. It may even challenge everything you thought you knew about money and debt. But if you give me a chance, if you keep an open mind for the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how ordinary people in seemingly impossible situations have completely freed themselves from the burden of debt. Not through more effort, not through more sacrifice, but through a fundamental change in the way they are. And when I say change, I don't mean just thinking differently or repeating empty affirmations. I mean a real transformation at the core of your identity, in the very essence of how you define yourself in relation to abundance and prosperity. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this is where true transformation happens. Look, most financial programs, self-help books, and success gurus teach you strategies, methods, step guides. They tell you how to make money, how to invest better, how to save more efficiently, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but all of that is working on the surface, in the world of effects. It's like trying to change your reflection in the mirror by making faces at it. What you really need to do is change your own expression. What you need to understand is something much more fundamental, something happening behind the scenes of your own experience. It's not about learning how to make money. It's about changing the internal state from which you're observing yourself. This is a journey few people are willing to take because it requires brutal honesty with yourself. It requires looking directly at that hidden truth you've been avoiding. Your real problem isn't the lack of funds in your bank account. Your true problem is that you are seeing yourself, feeling yourself, experiencing yourself from a state of lack. And here's the devastating impact of that perception. As long as you remain identified with that state, as long as you keep being that version of yourself defined by what you don't have, the external world has no choice but to reflect exactly that back to you. It's law. It's like the gravity of consciousness. Your external world is simply your internal world, projected, materialized, made visible. The debts you see, the red numbers in your account, the collector calls. These are all faithful mirrors of an internal state you've been nurturing, perhaps without even realizing it. If this content is resonating with you, subscribe to the channel. Here, I regularly share these truths and techniques that truly transform lives. This isn't information, it's real transformation. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is like a radio station. If you're tuned into the frequency of lack, constantly broadcasting thoughts like "I don't have enough," it's never enough. I'll always be in debt. What do you think you're going to receive back from the universe? Exactly. More evidence of that same frequency, more lack, more debt, more situations that confirm your belief that you're not enough, that you don't deserve abundance, that money is hard to get and even harder to keep. The revelation that changed everything for me, and can change everything for you, is this: you don't need to become someone different to have abundance. You need to recognize that you already are abundance. But you've mistakenly identified with a mask, a persona, that believes it is limited. Every decision you make, every thought you hold, every emotion you feel is reinforcing either your identification with lack or your identification with abundance. There is no middle ground. You are constantly choosing, even if you're not doing it consciously. And this is where the 3 techniques I'm about to share with you come into play in a powerful way. These techniques are not to get something you don't have. They are to awaken to what you already are. They are to change the state, the frequency, the identity from which you are operating. When you change that, when you truly change your state of consciousness, everything else must follow. Not because you're forcing it, but because it is the natural consequence of becoming a different person at the level of consciousness. Type in the comments, "I understand that I am consciousness creating." If this is resonating with you right now, allow me to show you something probably no one has explained to you this way. When you look at those red numbers in your account, when you hear the phone ring knowing it's a collector, when you feel that knot in your stomach every time you think about your debts, you're experiencing effects, pure effects, not causes. This distinction is absolutely crucial for your transformation, because most people spend their whole lives struggling against effects while completely ignoring the real cause. The collectors calling you, the interest accumulating month after month, those endless nights lying in bed calculating and recalculating numbers, trying to solve the impossible puzzle of how to pay everything you owe. None of that is the cause of your suffering. They are symptoms. They are the shadows projected by something much deeper, a false belief, a mistaken identity, a state of consciousness you've adopted as if it were your true self. And here is the hidden truth that completely changes the game. You can spend the rest of your life trying to fix those effects. You can work 18 hours a day. You can sacrifice your health, your relationships, your peace of mind, trying to earn more money, pay faster, free yourself from debt through sheer physical and mental effort. But if you don't change the cause, if you don't transform the state of consciousness that is projecting those shadows, the debts will return, perhaps in different forms, perhaps under different names. But they will return because the source remains active, still transmitting the same frequency. Look around you. See how many people spend decades in this endless cycle. They work harder, get that second job, sell things, borrow to pay off other debts, juggle increasingly complex finances, and the mountain of debt may temporarily shrink. But it never disappears completely. There's always something new. Always another emergency, another unexpected expense. Why? Because they're trying to change the shadow without moving themselves. They're trying to modify the reflection without changing what's in front of the mirror. Consciousness is the origin of everything. Not your circumstances, not the economy, not your salary, not luck or the lack of it. Your consciousness, the state from which you are observing yourself, the story you tell yourself about who you are in relation to money and abundance. That is what is creating your financial experience. Every thought you accept as true about yourself, every emotion you feed regarding your financial situation, every mental image you maintain of yourself struggling with money, all of that is working behind the scenes to materialize exactly what is being held inside you. The journey to real financial freedom doesn't start with a better budget or a more efficient payment plan. It starts with a radical decision to stop identifying with the character that is in debt. It begins when you realize that this is not you. It never has been. It's simply a suit you put on, a role you've been playing with such conviction that you forgot it was just a role. And the moment you recognize this, the instant you give yourself permission to disidentify from that limited version of yourself, everything starts to change, because the source of the projection itself is changing. Type in the comments, "I create from my consciousness," if you're beginning to see the impact of this revelation. Now you need to embrace something that will challenge everything you've been taught about your place in the world. Listen carefully. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are not a boat adrift on the ocean of the economy, tossed by forces you cannot control. You are a creator. You always have been. Every moment of your life, consciously or not, you have been creating your reality through the greatest power in the universe, your imagination. Your imagination is not just a mental toy for fantasizing or entertaining yourself. Your imagination is literally the creative power of God operating through you. When you begin to understand this, when you truly assimilate it into the deepest part of your being, everything changes. Because if your imagination is the creative power, then what you've been imagining about yourself, the stories you've been telling yourself, the mental images you've maintained of yourself struggling with money, have all been the perfect mold to create exactly the experience you are living now. But here comes the liberating part, the revelation that can change everything in this very moment. If you have unconsciously created your current situation through uncontrolled imagination, you can consciously create a completely different reality once you learn to direct that imagination with purpose. When you master your imaginative activity, when you take control of that power and use it deliberately to assume a new state of consciousness, the vast external world has no choice but to completely reorganize around your new assumption. It must. It is law. And this is not abstract theory or pretty philosophy to make you feel better. It is something I have seen manifest again and again in real life, with real people in situations that seemed absolutely impossible to resolve. I have witnessed transformations that defy all conventional logic. People who were desperately in debt, with creditors at their doors and no apparent way out, have become completely debt-free in days. Not weeks, not months, days. I have seen entrepreneurs literally on the verge of bankruptcy, their businesses about to collapse, suddenly receive unexpected checks, opportunities appearing from nowhere, solutions that not only met their needs but far exceeded them. And when you investigate these cases, when you go behind the scenes of these seemingly miraculous transformations, you always discover the same pattern. These people changed something fundamental inside themselves. First, they changed their state of consciousness. They stopped being the version of themselves that was in debt and assumed the version that was already free and prosperous. The impact of this internal change was so powerful, so real at the level of consciousness, that the external world had no choice but to reflect this new identity. The universe conspired, circumstances aligned. Opportunities appeared, money flowed. Not because these people worked harder or were luckier, but because they became someone different in their consciousness, and that someone different lives in a different world. Type in the comments, I am the creator of my reality. If this resonates deeply with you, then how is this done? How do you go from being someone trapped in debt to someone living in complete financial freedom? Here is where we enter truly transformative territory, where the backstage of conscious creation is fully revealed. The first technique you need to master is something I call living in the end. And no, I'm not talking about visualization or repeating empty affirmations in front of a mirror. I'm talking about something much deeper and more powerful. Living in the end means that you assume the full feeling of being debt, free right now in this instant, before you have a single cent of physical evidence to support it. It means you stop thinking of freedom as something you want, something you hope for, something that will come in the future if you work hard enough. Instead, you start thinking from freedom, feeling from that place, moving through your day as the person who is already financially free. This distinction between thinking about something and thinking from something is the difference between staying stuck and experiencing real transformation. Most people stand in their current state of debt and look at freedom as if it were a distant mountain they must climb. But when you live in the end, you mentally teleport to the top of that mountain and see the world from there. You feel what it feels like to be there. Not in the future, not as a wish, but now. Your body, nervous system, and subconscious cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a physical one. When you inhabit that state with enough emotional reality, your consciousness identifies with it and must materialize it. The second technique is equally revolutionary and perhaps even more surprising: revising the past. Here comes a hidden truth that will completely challenge your concept of time and causality. Your current debt is nothing more than an unreviewed scene from the past that keeps replaying forward, creating more of the same in your present and future. Every debt began with an event, a decision, a specific moment in time, and that moment, contrary to what you believe, is not set in stone. It is not immutable. The past exists nowhere except in your present memory. And memory is completely malleable. When you consciously review a past event in your imagination, when you replace it with a different outcome, when you change the mental scene of how something happened, you are literally rewriting the cause that has been producing your current effects. It sounds impossible to the logical mind, I know, but the impact of this practice is undeniable. When you review the origin of your debts in imagination, when you see those moments unfold differently, something extraordinary happens in your consciousness. The causal chain breaks, and a new reality begins to emerge. Type in the comments, "I am ready to rewrite my story." If you feel these techniques are speaking directly to something deep within you. The third technique is where it all comes together, where the pieces of the puzzle fit to reveal the deepest secret of conscious creation, the consciousness of I am. And when I say I am, I'm not talking about your name, your profession, your story, or your circumstances. I'm talking about that pure, formless, faceless consciousness that exists before you attach any label. It's that sense of existing, of being, that remains constant, no matter what is happening around you. Close your eyes for a moment and simply feel that you exist. Don't think about who or what you are. Just feel the pure fact that you are. That naked consciousness, that fundamental I am, is the most powerful state you can access, because it is the blank canvas on which you can paint any reality. It is the fertile ground where you can plant new seeds of identity. And these seeds, when watered with the right feeling, with genuine emotion, will inevitably sprout as the circumstances of your life. Here is the revelation that changes everything. Whatever you attach to your I am, that is what you become. If you say and feel, "I am someone in debt," that is the seed you plant. If you say and feel, "I am prosperous, I am financially free," that is a completely different seed. Your I am does not judge, it does not discriminate. It does not decide whether a seed is good or bad. It simply takes what you give it and cultivates it until it becomes your lived experience. Subscribe now so you don't miss the upcoming videos. There is much more to share about how to use your consciousness to create the life you desire. This is just the beginning of the journey, and this is where this approach radically departs from everything else you've tried before. Other teachings, other methods tell you to visualize what you want, to affirm what you desire, to set clear intentions. And yes, there is some value in that, but they almost always fail because they keep you trapped in a state of wanting. And to want, by definition, is to acknowledge that you don't have. It is standing in lack while looking at the abundance you do not possess. It's like being hungry while imagining food, but never feeling full. What I'm sharing with you today is fundamentally different. It's not about wanting abundance, about hoping to be free of debt, or waiting for something to change. It's about becoming that which you desire, not seeking it outside, not chasing it, not begging for it, simply being it. When you become abundance in your consciousness, when you fully identify with the state of being financially free, the entire universe must reflect that identity, because your external world is simply your inner world objectified, made visible, projected onto the screen of your physical experience. This journey is not about acquiring something new. It is about remembering and reclaiming what you already are in essence, but have forgotten under layers of conditioning, fear, and limiting beliefs. It is a process of disidentifying with the false and recognizing the true. Type in the comments, "I am abundance," if you feel this truth is awakening something deep within you. Now, let me reveal something that most people completely overlook, and yet it is the difference between success and failure in this journey of transformation. Pay attention to the language you use when you talk about yourself. Most people say, "Someday I will be prosperous. I hope to be debt-free. I wish to be abundant." Do you notice the pattern? Everything is in the future tense. Everything is postponed. Everything is placed in some hazy tomorrow that never arrives. Because when tomorrow comes, it is always today. The power of I am exists only in the present moment. Not I will be. Not I hope to be, not I want to be. Simply I am, now in this instant. When you say I am free, I am abundant, I am financially prosperous, and feel it with the same naturalness as you feel being human, breathing, existing, something extraordinary happens behind the scenes of your consciousness. You are activating the greatest creative power in the universe. You are reclaiming your mastery over your world, because here is the truth. Your world does not respond to what you hope to be or what you want to be. Your world responds only to who you are being right now. The frequency you emit in this moment is what the universe reads. It is the instruction it follows to create your experience. And when you change that frequency, when you change your present state of being, everything must change. Let me tell you a real story that perfectly illustrates this principle in action. A few years ago, a woman came to one of my seminars. She was 55 years old. And if you know anything about the world, you know that 55 is not an easy age to reinvent yourself, especially without resources. This woman had no job. Her bank account was practically empty. She was behind on her rent, had no family to help her, no safety net. The world would have labeled her situation as desperate, as a lost cause. But this woman had been studying these principles for almost a year, and in her desperation, she made the bravest decision of her life. She decided to try what she had learned. She decided to become another person at the level of consciousness, even though all the physical evidence screamed otherwise. At first, like many, she tried to imagine every specific thing she needed: a job, money for rent, proper clothing, a car. But she became overwhelmed by the enormity of the list. Her mind grew exhausted trying to visualize every need being met. Then she did something brilliant. She simplified the whole process to its purest essence. Instead of imagining every detail, she simply captured a feeling that something wonderful was happening right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. And from that state of feeling that something beautiful was unfolding in her life, something already in motion, everything began to change in ways she could never have planned or predicted. Type in the comments, "Something wonderful is happening to me now." If you feel that this story has something powerful to teach you. This woman discovered a hidden truth that many overlook on their transformation journey. Simplicity has extraordinary power. When you try to control every detail, when your mind exhausts itself trying to orchestrate every aspect of your manifestation, you are actually blocking the natural flow of abundance. You are saying through your actions, "I have to figure it all out." And that keeps creation trapped within the limits of your conscious mind, which is infinitely smaller than the power of your subconscious. So this woman did something revolutionary in her simplicity. She remembered something fundamental. You do not need to imagine the specific details. You need to capture the essential feeling of your desire fulfilled. Not the how, not the when, not the who. Just the feeling, the pure feeling that something wonderful is happening in your life right now. And from that space of feeling, from that elevated frequency, the universe has complete freedom to bring your good in ways your limited mind could never have imagined or planned every night. As she prepared for sleep, this woman adopted a simple but profoundly powerful practice. She would lie in bed, close her eyes, and instead of worrying about overdue bills, instead of calculating how much she owed or how she would survive another day, she would simply whisper to herself a phrase that would change everything. "Isn't it wonderful? Something wonderful is happening to me now." And with those words, she cultivated the feeling, not the thought. The genuine emotion of joy, gratitude, and awe, as if something truly beautiful was already unfolding in her life. Understand the impact of what she was doing. She was not denying her reality. She was not pretending her problems didn't exist. She was making a radical decision to live from a different state of consciousness. She was choosing to inhabit a state where the wonderful was her present reality, not her future hope. And here is the magic of working behind the scenes of consciousness. When you change your internal state with enough persistence and feeling, the external world has no choice but to reorganize to reflect that new state. She did this for 60 consecutive nights. 60 nights of falling asleep in that feeling that something wonderful was happening, 0.60 nights of refusing to accept the verdict of her senses, 60 nights of keeping her consciousness firmly anchored in a state of joyful expectation. And as she did this, as she persevered in this simple yet powerful practice, invisible forces began to move in her favor. Connections were forming, opportunities were aligning. The universe was conspiring to bring her exactly what she was being in her consciousness. Type in the comments, "I am choosing the feeling now," if you understand the power of this simple yet profound practice. Then, after 60 nights of faithful practice, something extraordinary began to manifest in the physical world. One ordinary day, seemingly mundane, this woman happened to run into an acquaintance she hadn't seen in months. They spoke briefly, a light conversation about recent trips to New York. Nothing memorable, nothing to suggest anything significant was happening. They said goodbye, and she continued her day completely forgetting that seemingly insignificant encounter. But behind the scenes, in the invisible realm where causes are woven before becoming effects, something profound was in motion. Exactly 1 month after that casual encounter, this man appeared at her door. And when she opened it, he placed in her hands a certified check for $2,500. Imagine that moment. Imagine the feeling of holding in your hands the physical evidence that your consciousness truly creates your reality. Imagine the emotional impact of seeing your faith transformed into tangible form. The story behind that check was like something out of a dream. It involved an old friend she hadn't seen or heard from in over 25 years. This friend had become extremely prosperous during that time, and through the mutual acquaintance had learned of her situation, for reasons she would never fully understand, reasons defying ordinary logic. This man chose to share a portion of his wealth with her. There was no obligation, no previous debt, just the universe orchestrating the perfection of her new consciousness manifesting. But here is where the story becomes even more revealing of the power of this inner work. The $2,500 check was just the beginning. Over the next 2 full years from the office of a lawyer, this woman began receiving monthly checks. They were not small amounts. They were generous checks that not only covered all her basic living needs but left plenty extra for the beautiful things in life. She was able to buy a car, quality clothing, move into a spacious and comfortable apartment, and most liberating of all, she no longer needed to worry about earning her daily bread. Abundance flowed to her consistently, effortlessly, and reliably. This transformation did not happen because she worked harder. It did not happen because she learned new professional skills or found a better job. It happened because she changed who she was being in her consciousness. She became someone for whom the wonderful was natural, expected, and her normal state of existence. And when you become that internally, the external world must, by law, reflect it back to you. Type in the comments, "My abundance flows naturally," if you feel this story is awakening something real in your own life. Now, I want you to grasp something absolutely fundamental here, because it is the difference between those who achieve this transformation and those who remain stuck trying unsuccessfully. This woman did not imagine a specific person bringing her money. She did not visualize details of how the help would arrive. She did not create a plan or elaborate scheme. She did not manipulate or force anything in the external world. The only thing she did, night after night, for 60 consecutive days, was to maintain the feeling that something wonderful was happening in her life right now. This is what I call the feeling. It is the secret, not the thought, not mechanical visualization, not repeated affirmations without emotion, but the feeling, the living, pulsating, real emotion of your desire already fulfilled. Because your subconscious, which is the true creator of your experience, does not respond to empty words. It responds only to feelings. When you feel something with enough intensity and persistence, your subconscious accepts it as true and immediately begins to orchestrate all the circumstances necessary to make it a physical reality. Let me show you how this same principle worked differently, yet equally powerfully, for another person. A man came to my consultation in a state of real desperation. He ran a small business, a sole proprietorship he had built with years of effort and dedication. But during one of those periodic economic recessions, his world began to collapse. Sales had plummeted drastically for several consecutive months. This was not a minor decline. It was a steep drop that was destroying everything he had built. He was deeply in debt and needed at least $3,000 immediately, just to keep the doors of his business open. His auditors, the people looking at the cold, hard numbers, gave him practical and reasonable advice. Close the business now, save what you can, and move on. It was sensible advice from the perspective of the material world. It was what any logical person would do in his situation. But this man had been studying these principles. Although he admitted he was skeptical and had never really tried them, desperation finally pushed him to make a radical decision. One Tuesday, he received a letter from a real estate agent. The letter was gloomy, filled with bad news. It listed all the reasons why sales in his area had stalled and predicted a long, dark period ahead. It was exactly the kind of message that crushes anyone's spirit and confirms all their worst fears. Most men would have read that letter, felt their spirit break, and resigned themselves to defeat. But this man did something completely different, something that reveals the hidden power of the second technique I shared with you. Revision. Type in the comments, "I rewrite my reality," if you are starting to see how these stories connect to your own situation. Instead of accepting that letter as the final verdict on his fate, he took the physical letter in his hands and decided to revise it. Not on paper, but in the only place that truly matters, his imagination. He closed his eyes and rewrote the content of that letter in his mind. Mentally, he saw different words on the page. Instead of pessimism and bad news, he saw enthusiasm. He saw people eager to take his listing. He saw positivity, opportunity, momentum. He read this imaginary letter over and over in his mind until it felt more real to him than the physical letter he held. Understand the impact of what he was doing behind the scenes, in his consciousness. He was using the power of revision to change the past that was creating his present. Because that letter wasn't just paper and ink, it was a seed planted in his consciousness that, if accepted, would grow into more failure, more losses, more confirmation of his worst fears. By revising it in imagination, he was removing that bad seed before it could take root and planting a new one in its place. But he didn't stop there. He understood something profound. He was the producer, director, and actor of his own life's play. So he decided to extend his imaginary drama beyond simply revising that letter. He decided to create an entire scene that involved the fulfillment of his desire, a simple but powerful scene. The theme of his play was direct. The lot is sold for a profit. That was it. Simple, clear, definitive. As the author of this imaginary play, he wrote a brief scene. He saw himself standing in the agent's office, not as someone pleading or waiting, but as someone who had already achieved his goal. He extended his hand to the agent and said with genuine gratitude, "Thank you, sir." And he heard the agent respond with professional courtesy, "It was a pleasure doing business with you." That was all, a scene of perhaps 30 seconds. Nothing elaborate, nothing complicated. As the director of his mental play, he rehearsed this scene in his imagination over and over until every detail became vividly real. He could see the office, the furniture, the expressions on the people's faces. He could feel the firmness of the handshake, hear the tone of voice, and as the actor, most importantly, he felt the emotion that would be his if this were actually happening. He felt profound relief, gratitude, the weight lifting from his shoulders, the freedom of knowing his problem was solved. He practiced this scene for 3 days, just 3 days, 72 hours of keeping this new reality alive in his imagination, while the outside world continued showing evidence of failure. 3 days of being, in his consciousness, the man whose problem was already solved, whose sale had already closed, whose crisis had already passed. Type in the comments, "My scene is already fulfilled," if you can feel the power of creating your own mental play. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, something extraordinary happened. The real estate agent, the same one who had sent the discouraging letter, called him. There was a buyer, and not just any buyer. It was someone ready to put down a deposit immediately at the exact price the man had specified in his imagination. Exactly 5 days after constructing and rehearsing his imaginary scene, that scene became physical, tangible reality. He went to the office, entered through that door, stood in front of the agent, extended his hand, and spoke the exact words he had rehearsed in his mind. "Thank you, sir." The agent smiled and responded precisely with the words he had imagined 3 days before. "It was a pleasure doing business with you." Every word, gesture, detail exactly as he had envisioned. But what impacted this man the most was not the money. Even though the money was desperately needed and arrived just in time to save his business. What truly transformed him was the incontrovertible proof that he possessed a power within himself to consciously create circumstances. He had reviewed the facts of his life, had reimagined that letter in his mind, and by mentally revising it, he caused reality itself to conform to his revision. That revelation changed everything for him because he finally understood that he was not a helpless victim of the external world. Now, let me take you deeper into this concept of revision, because here is a hidden truth that will completely challenge your understanding of time and causality. The past is not fixed. I know all of your education and experience tells you otherwise. You have been taught that the past is history written in stone, immutable, permanent. But that is an illusion. The past exists nowhere in the universe except as a present memory in your consciousness right now. And memory, contrary to what you believe, is completely malleable. Every time you recall something, you are recreating it in this present moment. You are not accessing a fixed file stored somewhere. You are actively reconstructing that event in your mind now. And in that process of reconstruction, you have the power to change it. When you revise a memory, when you take a past event that created negative consequences and replay it in your imagination as it should have happened, you are doing something profoundly powerful behind the scenes of your reality. You are changing the cause that has been producing your present effects. You are cutting the root that has been growing your current experience. And when you change the cause in your consciousness, the effects must change in your physical world, not because you are manipulating the external world, but because you are transforming the very structure from which your world is projected. Your current debts, each one of them, began with a past event, a decision, a purchase, a loss, a specific moment, and that moment is alive in your memory now, feeding and perpetuating your present situation. Type in the comments, "My past is transforming now," if you feel this understanding is opening a new door in your consciousness. Now I want to show you how this same principle of living in the end worked in a way many would consider impossible. But that demonstrates the absolute power of conscious assumption when applied with unwavering faith. A man attended one of my conferences one night, by his own admission, completely without money. He had read about the law of assumption in several texts, but had never done anything with that knowledge. That night, something inside him decided it was time to really test if this worked, and he chose something bold, something that would completely challenge his ability to believe. He decided to imagine himself as the winner of the pool 510 at the Caliente racetrack. Now, to understand the magnitude of what he was attempting, this is not a simple game. In this specific pool, you must correctly choose the winners of 6 consecutive races, from race TCO to race 10. 6 races, 6 winners, the mathematical odds are astronomical. It is exactly the kind of thing a logical mind immediately dismisses as impossible. But this man was not thinking about probabilities. He was thinking about assumption in his imagination. He constructed a specific and powerful scene. He saw himself standing at the racetrack sorting his tickets after the races. And as he sorted them mentally, he felt in his hands the tickets for each winner, one after another. Not just visualized, he felt them, the texture of the paper, the weight of each ticket, the physical sensation of holding victory in his hands. And as he did this in his imagination, he felt the unmistakable, undeniable emotion of having won, of achieving the impossible. His body responded to this imagination as if it were real. He felt goosebumps running along his arms, that automatic physical response you cannot fake, which only comes when something touches you deeply. That tells you something crucial about the power of felt imagination. When your body responds, when your nervous system reacts to your imagined scene, you have crossed the threshold. You have moved your entire being into that new state. It is not just your mind thinking about something, it is your whole self experiencing it. But he did not stop there. He extended his imaginary drama further. He saw himself approaching the teller window. He saw the teller counting a large sum of money, and then in his imagination he felt something very specific. He saw himself placing that money under his shirt, against his chest, feeling the weight of the bills against his body, feeling their reality, their solidity. This was his complete scene, simple yet charged with real feeling. Genuine emotion, the absolute sensation of victory fulfilled. For 3 full weeks, 21 consecutive nights, this man rehearsed this scene before falling asleep. He lived it, felt it, inhabited it as his present reality. He became the man who had already won, not the man who was waiting to win, not the man who desired to win, the man who already was a winner in his consciousness. Type in the comments, I am already victorious. If you understand that victory exists first in consciousness before it manifests physically. After those 3 weeks of faithful practice, 21 nights of inhabiting his victory in imagination, this man physically traveled to Caliente, and that day, in the tangible material world, every detail of his imagined scene came to life. He sorted his tickets exactly as he had imagined. He felt the same goosebumps run across his body. He approached the teller exactly as he had rehearsed mentally. The only change, the only difference from his imagined scene, was this: instead of receiving cash, the teller handed him a check for $4,000. $4,000. Think about that for a moment. Think about the impact of holding in your hands the physical proof that your imagination is not fantasy, but the most real creative power in the universe. This man had defied odds that most would consider impossible, and he had done it not through luck, not through an external system, but through the faithful application of an internal principle, the conscious assumption of the state of being a winner. When I shared this story at a later conference, another man in the audience came up to me and asked if he could duplicate this experience, and I told him something crucial that you also need to understand. He must decide his own imaginary scene. What works for one person may not resonate with another, but whatever scene he chooses, he must live in the end. He should not mentally work on the means, the how. He should simply imaginatively inhabit the feeling of the fulfilled desire. 1 month later, this second man appeared and showed me a check. $16,000 won, exactly in the same pool, 510, at the same racetrack. But here is where his story becomes even more revealing of the power of this law. This man did not just want money. He wanted proof. He wanted to know with absolute certainty whether this was coincidence or law, luck or principle, a chance fluke or a hidden truth about how reality truly works. So he dared to try it a second time. This time, he completely changed his goal. Instead of imagining winning the races, he imagined having substantial bank accounts. He saw himself walking into 2 different banks. At each bank, he saw the manager smile appreciatively as he entered. He heard the teller greet him cordially. He requested to see his account balances, and in one bank saw $10,000, in the other $15,000. He did not imagine how this would happen. He did not sketch out a plan or manipulate anything. He simply inhabited the reality of it. And once again, his assumption solidified into fact. It became tangible physical reality. These men discovered what I am teaching you right now. You do not need to know the path. You do not need to figure out the how. Your only task is to assume the state of consciousness of the one who already has what you desire. Live in that state, feel from that state, and all things will be added to you. The means will appear, opportunities will arise, circumstances will align, not because you force them, but because you have changed who you are being. And a different person lives in a different world. Type in the comments, "The law works for me," if you feel these stories are confirming something your soul already knew. Now I want to share something deeply personal, because I believe that in vulnerability we find the most powerful truths. There was a time in my own life when I intimately knew the weight of financial limitation. It was not devastating poverty perhaps, but it was enough restriction to keep me constantly aware of lack. And in that consciousness of lack, unwittingly, I was actively perpetuating the very condition I despised. It was a prison I had built for myself with my own thoughts and emotions. I vividly remember the moment that changed everything for me. It was an ordinary night. I was lying in bed and caught myself in the act of creating my own limitation. I was mentally rehearsing with great detail and conviction all the reasons I could not afford something I desired. I was building a brilliant, perfectly argued, fully convincing case for my own limitation. And suddenly, like a flash of awareness, I realized what I was doing. I was using my imagination. The same power that creates worlds, the same power that has built civilizations, the same power that sustains the universe, to create more lack. I was imagining myself as poor, and as long as I persisted in this imagining, I had to remain poor. It was law. I could not escape it because I was the source of my experience. In that moment of brutal clarity, I made a decision that would transform my entire journey. I decided that I would no longer consent to the testimony of my senses. I would no longer accept the evidence of my bank account, my income, or my external circumstances as final. Instead, without evidence, without permission, without waiting for conditions to change first, I would assume that I was already the man I desired to be. Not in the future, not eventually. Now, in this present moment, I would begin assuming abundance before having a single cent to prove it. I began moving through my day assuming abundance, not mechanically affirming it, not anxiously waiting for it, but assuming it. Assumption is different. Assumption is acting from the state, not toward the state. I would walk past a store window and assume that I could buy anything there if I chose to. I would think about my bills and assume they were paid. I would imagine my bank statement and see exactly the figures I desired to see. At first, this felt like lying. My senses screamed that it wasn't true, but I persisted. I knew that I had to become, in consciousness, the man I wished to be in reality. And then the world began to change. Money came from unexpected sources. Opportunities that had never existed before appeared out of nowhere. Debts dissolved. Abundance flowed. But here is what I learned. What you must understand at the deepest level of your being. Money was never the point. Money was merely the shadow. What I had changed was the substance, my consciousness. Type in the comments, I change my consciousness now. If you recognize that you have been using your imagination to create limitation instead of abundance. I had stopped being the man who lacked and had become the man who had, and the world, which is nothing more than my consciousness projected outward, had no choice but to reflect that change. This is the teaching I am sharing with you today. Not empty positive thinking, not wishful hoping, but a radical re-identification with a new state of being, a journey from who you believed yourself to be toward who you truly are in essence. What I discovered in that process of transformation is something you must engrave deeply into your consciousness. Money always comes when you change your inner state, when you become abundance instead of seeking abundance. Money flows. But it comes in ways you could never have planned or predicted, unexpected sources, opportunities appearing out of nowhere, checks arriving in the mail, clients finding you without effort, debts being forgiven or mysteriously dissolving. The universe has infinite ways to bring you your good when you have assumed the correct state. But here is the deepest revelation, the hidden truth that changes everything. Money was never the real objective. Money was simply the shadow of something far more fundamental. The substance was my consciousness. What truly changed was not my bank account. What changed was me. I stopped identifying with the limited version of myself that believed in lack. I reclaimed my true identity as creative consciousness, as an unlimited being temporarily disguised as human form. And when that transformation occurs behind the scenes of your being, when you truly change your fundamental identity, everything else must follow. It cannot not follow. It is automatic, it is law. Because your outer world is nothing more than your inner world made visible. Your circumstances are your consciousness solidified. Your bank account is a perfect mirror of your state of consciousness in relation to money and abundance. Change the state, and the mirror must change its reflection. This is why working only on the external world never works in the long run. You may get more money by working harder, but if you do not change your consciousness of lack, that money will slip through your fingers, the debts will return, financial problems will resurface, because the source, the real cause, is still transmitting the same frequency. It is like trying to dry the floor while the pipe is still leaking. You can spend your entire life wiping, but the water will keep coming until you turn off the valve at its source. The source of your financial experience is not the economy. It is not your job. It is not your education or your skills. The source is your consciousness, the state from which you are observing yourself, the identity you have assumed as true. And when you change that source, when you move into a new state of consciousness, the entire structure of your life must reorganize itself around that new identity. It is inevitable. It is the most fundamental law of the universe, operating perfectly. Type in the comments, "I am the source of my abundance," if you are understanding that real change must happen first within you. Now allow me to take you to the very heart of this teaching, the foundation upon which everything else rests. This is the most important thing I will say in this entire video, so I want you to listen with every fiber of your being. Consciousness is the only reality. This is not abstract philosophy. It is not poetic metaphor. It is the literal, observable, verifiable truth of your existence. You are not a body that happens to possess consciousness as an accessory. You are consciousness having a temporary physical experience. Your consciousness, the fundamental I am that feels its own existence, is the eternal formless substance from which all form arises. Every object you see, every circumstance you experience, every person you meet, every dollar you earn or owe, all of it exists as it does because you are conscious of it being so. Your world is not something separate from you that exists independently out there. Your world is your consciousness objectified, your consciousness made visible, your consciousness projected onto the three-dimensional screen of space and time. When you say, "I am in debt," you are not describing a condition that exists outside of you and is affecting you. You are describing the state of consciousness you are currently occupying. And as long as you remain identified with that state, as long as you continue being that version of yourself defined by debt, you will continue to see its reflection in your world. It is absolutely inevitable. It is not punishment. It is not bad luck. It is simply law, the law that your consciousness creates your experience. Debt is not your problem. Let me repeat that because it is crucial. Debt is not your problem. Debt is the shadow. The problem is that you are standing in the light in such a way that your shadow takes the form of debt. Imagine literally standing under a bright light. The shape of your shadow depends entirely on where you stand and how you are positioned. Move slightly and the shadow changes. Stand somewhere else and the shadow takes on a completely different shape. Move far enough away from certain angles and the shadow can disappear entirely. Your state of consciousness is your position under the light. When you change where you stand consciously, when you change your internal state, the external shadow must change instantly. There is no delay in the shadow when you move. The shadow moves with you. In the same way, when you change your state of consciousness, your external world begins to reorganize immediately to reflect that new state. There may be a delay before you see the full physical manifestation, but the process begins the instant you assume the new state. Most people spend their entire lives desperately trying to change the shadow while remaining perfectly immobile in their consciousness. They attempt to manipulate the effect while ignoring the cause. And then they wonder why nothing really changes. Because they keep experiencing the same difficulties over and over, just under different disguises. Type in the comments, "My shadow follows my light," if you understand that changing your position of consciousness automatically changes your external reality. Now, let me reveal something so profound that when you truly understand it, it will completely transform your relationship with reality. When you say, "I am," you are not uttering ordinary words. You are speaking the name of God, not the God of organized religion, not some external deity judging from a distant heaven, but the fundamental creative power of the universe flowing through you, which is you in your deepest essence. I am is the absolute that self-defines. It is the foundation upon which all existence rests. It is pure consciousness before any condition or limitation is attached. And here is the secret that changes everything. Whatever you attach to your I am, you become. If you say and feel, I am poor, you have defined your I am as poverty, and your I am, being the creative power that it is, must objectify that definition. If you say, I am sick, your I am takes that identity and materializes it. But if you say, I am prosperous, if you say, I am free, if you say, I am abundant, and feel it with the same natural certainty with which you feel your own breathing, then your I am must manifest that reality. It has no choice. It is its nature to create what you affirm yourself to be. Most people use this power unconsciously against themselves. They go through their day saying, I am tired, I am stressed, I am in debt, I am limited. And then they wonder why their lives reflect exactly those conditions. They are using the name of God, the greatest power in the universe, to create their own prison. But when you understand this, when you recognize the power you have, you can begin to use this I am consciously, deliberately, to create the life you want to live. Now I want to show you the crucial difference between thinking about something and thinking from something, because this distinction is where most people fail when attempting to change their reality. Most people, when they want to be free from debt, stand in their current state of being in debt and think about being free. They look toward financial freedom as something far away, something in the future, something they desire but do not have. They are thinking about the end from the beginning, and that keeps them trapped in the beginning. But thinking from the end is radically different. It means you move in your imagination to the final result, to the state of already being free of debt, and you think from there. You don't look toward freedom. You look from freedom. You don't observe your fulfilled desire as something separate from you. You become the person for whom that desire is already fulfilled, and you see the world through the eyes of that person. You feel with the feelings of that person, make decisions from the mindset of that person. This is not a subtle difference. It is the difference between staying stuck and experiencing real transformation. When you think from the end, you are occupying the state, you are being that new version of yourself, and when you are something in consciousness, it must manifest in form. Type in the comments, I think from my freedom, if you understand that you will no longer look toward your desire, but from your fulfilled desire. Now you need to understand something that most spiritual and personal development teachings completely overlook. You can visualize all day long. You can create elaborate vision boards. You can repeat affirmations 1,000 times in front of the mirror. But if there is no real feeling behind it, if there is no genuine emotion, nothing will change. And the reason is simple but profound. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. Your I am, that creative power that constantly shapes your reality, does not respond to empty thoughts. It responds only to feelings. Think of it this way. Your conscious mind speaks the language of words and logical concepts, but your subconscious, the place where all creation truly happens, speaks a completely different language. It speaks the language of emotion, feeling, lived experience. When you feel something deeply, when an emotion moves through you and stirs you, you are communicating directly with the creative power within you. You are giving it instructions that it understands perfectly and that it must obey. This explains why so many people fail with manifestation techniques. They think about being debt-free all day. They create detailed lists of what they want. They talk about abundance constantly. But deep down, at the level of real feeling, they still feel poor, limited, trapped, and it is the deep feeling, not their surface thoughts, that is creating their experience. Feeling always wins, because feeling is the true language of creation. So, when you practice living in the end, when you imagine yourself debt-free, it is not enough to simply visualize your bank account with positive numbers. You must feel what you would feel if that were your reality right now. You must generate the emotion of relief, gratitude, freedom, security. You must allow that emotion to fill you completely until your body responds, until your nervous system accepts this new reality as true. That is when the creative power activates. That is when transformation begins in the invisible backstage of your life. And now, I want you to understand something even more revolutionary about the second technique I shared with you. Revision. Every debt you carry right now, every financial obligation weighing on you, began as a specific event in time. There was a particular moment, a particular day, when you made that decision, made that purchase, signed that contract, lost that money. That moment passed. It's over, or at least you think so. But here is the hidden truth. That moment remains alive in your present memory, and more importantly, that memory is constantly replaying forward, generating the consequences you are experiencing now. Revision is the art of going back to that original event in your memory and replaying it in your imagination. But this time with a different outcome. This time, you replay it as it should have happened, if you had acted from wisdom, from abundance, from your best version. You are not denying that the event happened. You are changing the causal seed in your consciousness that continues to produce the bitter fruit in your present. Type in the comments. I rewrite my causes if you are ready to use revision to change the past events that created your present debts. Now I want to give you something extremely practical, something you can start applying tonight. This is the nighttime technique that integrates everything we've discussed so far. The moment before sleep is sacred. It's the moment when your conscious mind releases control and your subconscious becomes completely receptive. What you imprint in your consciousness in those moments, just before falling asleep, becomes the seed that germinates overnight and grows into your experience the next day. When you lie down tonight, the first thing you do is completely relax. Release all tension from your body. Feel every muscle loosen. Feel your weight sink into the bed. Take several deep breaths until you feel that sense of calm that precedes sleep. From this state of deep relaxation, review your day, but don't review it passively. Actively look for any moments where you felt lack, worry about money, or anxiety about debts. When you find those moments, stop them mentally and change them, revise them. If you received a bill that caused stress, imagine opening that same bill, but seeing it marked as paid. If you had a difficult conversation about money, replay it with a positive outcome. After reviewing and correcting your day, move to your final scene. This is the simple scene that implies you are already debt-free. It can be as simple as feeling deep peace as you fall asleep, knowing all your obligations are fulfilled, or it can be seeing your bank statement with numbers that make you smile. The important thing is not the elaborate details, but the feeling. Feel the relief, feel the freedom, feel the gratitude of being someone who owes nothing to anyone. And while you feel this, allow the wonderful phrase to naturally arise in your consciousness. Something wonderful is happening in my life right now. Feel the truth of it. Then, and this is crucial, sleep in that feeling. Don't allow your mind to wander to worry or doubt as you fall asleep. Maintain the feeling of financial freedom. Immerse yourself in sleep while still inhabiting that state of consciousness. Whatever is in your consciousness at the moment of falling asleep is deeply imprinted in your subconscious and begins working in the backstage of your reality while you sleep. And now I want to leave you with the most transformative revelation of all, the truth that once you truly understand it and feel it deep within your being, will free you from all limitation forever. You are not a limited being subject to external conditions. That is the great lie you have believed. You are infinite consciousness. You are the unlimited creative power of the universe, experiencing itself through the form you call your body and your life. You are constantly, eternally creating your experience through the state of consciousness you occupy. Type in the comments. I am consciousness creating. If you feel this truth awakening something deep and eternal within you. Once you know this, once you feel it vibrating in every cell of your body, nothing can ever bind you again. No debt, no circumstance, no external condition, because you will have remembered who you really are, awakened from the dream of limitation, and reclaimed your power as the conscious creator of your reality. Look, if you have made it this far with me, if you have remained present throughout this journey, it means something important. It means your soul recognizes this truth. It means you are ready for this journey of transformation. You are not here by accident. Something deeper than your conscious mind has brought you to this moment, to these words, to this revelation. And if this content has touched something real inside you, if you feel these teachings can change your life in the way they have changed the lives of so many others, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here I regularly share these deep truths, these techniques that work, this knowledge that can set you free. This is not content meant to entertain. It is content meant to transform. And if that is what you are looking for, this is your place. Leave a comment right now saying, "I made it to the end and I'm ready." I want to know who is truly committed to this path. I want to know who is going to take these techniques and apply them faithfully. Because when you write those words, you're not just telling me, you're telling yourself you are making a commitment to your own transformation. And that commitment is the first real step toward your freedom. If this video resonated with you, if you felt that connection, that recognition that something true is being shared here, give it a like. Not for me, but because that simple gesture tells the universe, tells your own consciousness that you are aligned with this teaching, that you are saying yes to your own abundance, that you are choosing freedom over limitation. And before you leave, there's a video right here beside this one that perfectly complements everything you've just learned. It's the natural continuation of this journey. Click it and continue with me there, because what I'm going to share with you in that video goes even deeper into these techniques and shows you exactly how to apply them in specific situations in your life. Remember, my friend, you are infinite consciousness, temporarily disguised as human form. Never forget that. And now that you know it, now that you've felt it, go and create the life you deserve to live. I'll see you in the next one.